Hey, now every state has its pros and cons, and California is no different. And of course, I could go on and on about all the things I love about it. And I mean, heck, right? I live here. I chose to be here. I love being here, and I'm going to stay here. But having said that, there are things that I cannot stand about California, about different aspects of this state, and that I just pray to God that someday that they will change. So, in this video, I'm keeping it real for you, and I'm going to take you through 5 things that I wish would just change about California like yesterday that you should know about if you're thinking about making this home. So, if that's what you're looking for, stick with me. We're going to get after it right now. All right, the first one I'm going to take you to is insurance costs. And look, this might sound boring. It's not. Wait till you're paying the bill. It won't be boring then. We have high fire zones in California all throughout the state, including right here in San Diego. And I'm telling you that if you find yourself in one of these high fire zones, you are getting ready to pay more insurance than you would in most other parts of the country. Now, I can't speak for, of course, places where there's hurricane risks and tornado risk. And it seems like, of course, every other place, wherever you're at, you might say, hey, well, we've got XYZ. I get it. But fire insurance is one of the most expensive insurances you can get. And especially if you have a luxury home, be careful, because if the value of replacement value exceeds a certain amount, then you are not covered. You have to get supplemental insurance, and it starts to get really challenging. Now, just to qualify that a little bit better, you can be covered, okay? So I'm not saying you wouldn't be, but a lot of the insurance companies have pulled out of California, especially in high fire zones, saying, look, we're not touching fire zone areas. And you might be thinking, like, where's that? Is that like in the forest somewhere? Is that where, there's redwoods all around you? No, anywhere where there's canyons and brush. And I mean, it's basically what California is. And so unless you're in very dense kind of, infill type, downtown San Diego type area, you'd be surprised how many areas are categorized as being high fire zone. So with that, just keep in mind as you're looking at it, make sure your agent's guiding you. Make sure you're asking those questions, and that we're talking also to the insurance agent to make sure that you know exactly what your costs are going to look like. Now, don't get me wrong. This isn't some kind of huge alarm. Of course, there are people at all income levels that are homeowners and that deal with this, but it's just something to be aware of so that you don't suddenly have an extra $500 a month you weren't counting on, or depending on the value of your property, you start getting to where, it's high value, high luxury, and you are in a high fire zone area, then sometimes your only possibility is the California Fair Plan and then very expensive supplemental insurance. So I'll get off the topic, but just know it. I hate what we have to deal with in terms of insurance in this state. The second thing that I really dislike about California is the red tape. I'm talking, the politics here are ridiculous. And look, I'm not talking red, white, blue, or anything in between. I'm not going to go there in this video. What I'm talking about is how darn difficult it is to do business, the simple things like getting a permit for construction on a residential lot that's clearly made for a house. Well, why should that be so hard to get a building permit? Everything is like that. If it takes 4 months in a place like Texas, just count on it. It's going to take 8 months here, right? Or maybe worse. And that's just one example. So if you're going to be in the business world, the development world, I mean, how California became one of the world's biggest economies with these policies, this red tape that we have to navigate, where the simple things in life, things that would literally build tax revenues for a city, for the state, that would move things forward, create employment, are slowed down by the local policies, by the local councils, by the local ordinances. And I mean, it is rough. So if you like moving through red tape, then California will please you. If you don't, then at least we have a gorgeous ocean, unbelievable cliffs, vistas. I mean, we have the most beautiful place on the planet possibly right here in California, and we get to enjoy it year round with our amazing weather. And thank God we do, because otherwise we'd probably be poking our eyes out, not knowing, not having that wonderful distraction while waiting for permits, business permits, building permits. It stinks, it sucks, it's a fact, but you know what? We live here anyway because it's that good. Let's go to the third thing. All right, let's stay. Look, I'm in a ranting mood. You could probably tell. So the third thing that I do not like about California is this unbelievable homeless crisis that is taking over the state. I mean, it's wild. You take a drive through, places like downtown LA, through parts of San Francisco, downtown San Diego. I'll just talk for downtown San Diego. It used to be that you'd find this, it's always been a problem. It's always been a problem we're trying to solve. And we try to solve it with empathy, but it seems like no matter what we do, no matter how much money we pour into it, it seems to be getting worse. And where these encampments would take place, right, and like certain, pockets, little sections of downtown have just seemed to expand and expand and expand and expand to the point where it's absolutely unavoidable if you are, say, in the downtown area, if you're in just places, again, like downtown LA, more the urban centers in these cities. And then you start looking at what happens where they're not policing. You look at the Bay Area, San Francisco, where they're not policing, smash and grab robberies and theft. And it's just some wild things happening in this state that are concerning. Now, is it enough to drive me away? No, because again, don't get me wrong. It's sort of like if I look at this table that's in front of me and I zoom in on this little piece, it's all I see. Okay, it's a little part of it. And the bigger landscape is, again, one of the most beautiful, most pleasant, most incredible places in the world with wonderful people that I am raising my children in, and I hope they raise their children in. But there's certainly also the truth that where I used to, when my first child was born, and we lived more in an urban center, my wife and I, and we'd love walking around and going to the restaurants and the bars and all, we loved it. Our son was born, and I remember once we kind of came out, right, of, when you have your first and you're just sort of hiding out at home and, you were like, all right, let's make our way outside. So I remember so clearly, we got him in the stroller, we go for a walk, and suddenly we're dodging homeless people, dodging sketchy people, dodging smokers, this, that. I mean, it's just like, all of a sudden we're like, all right, let's ditch out. We're going to the suburbs. And we have loved the suburbs. And of course, so much of San Diego is exactly the way it's been for so long and is beautiful, is unaffected. But we do have an issue around this that I'm hoping that they're going to figure out. I know that I would like to think both sides of the aisle are working on in a big, big way to try and solve in a bipartisan way. I will hold out hope that they will. But for now, it's just, it's more than it should be. I'll leave it there. For now, it's definitely more than it should be. It's something to know. Is it something that I think about on a daily basis or affects like my daily plans? Zero, okay? So let me make that clear. But when you do bump into it, and it's rarely by surprise, you know where you're going when you're going to bump into it, it's not the most pleasant. It's one of the things I don't like about our state. Hey, to interrupt really quickly, I just want to give you a reminder, subscribe to the channel and tap the bell for notifications. You'll be the first to know of any changing market conditions. And I'm Dan Beard, just committed to helping you make a smooth move. By the way, check out the first comment. We've given you really easy ways to connect. Fourth thing that I don't like about California is the traffic. Now, what I find really interesting about it, and I have not, let me say, by the way, I haven't verified if this is true or not, but this is a story I've heard multiple times from multiple sources since I was, like a teenager or so. And so I think there's probably a lot of truth to it. Apparently back in the day, this is something very few people are aware of. Apparently back in the day, California actually, and let's just talk about Los Angeles, had an extensive public transportation system. I mean, it was not the, freeway, just jungle, right? Concrete jungle that it is today. But what happened was that the major car companies bought out the railroads and all those public transportation systems. And I'm not sure how you buy a public transportation system, even hearing myself say that out loud. But I believe there were a bunch of, maybe there were private railways. And anyhow, somehow, these companies, I believe GM being one of them, buys them out only to destroy them, literally to make them not exist, so that they can then replace them with roads, with freeways, with streets, and the car-heavy culture that we have in California, and especially in Southern California. I mean, the amount of driving is more than in a lot of places. There's a ton of traffic. We have sprawling, just kind of really spread out big cities. And so it is going to be a fact of life. Now, what I really love about San Diego, the way that it's laid out, is that within this, traffic that certainly exists, okay? Like nobody can tell you that it doesn't, but it lends itself to not having to experience it on a daily basis. And the reason why is that San Diego is really kind of like a collection of towns. It's a collection of little towns that together make up this city. And in each of these little towns, they're self-contained or self-sustained to a large degree, right? They have their restaurants, they have their post offices, they have their little neighborhood shops, their barber shop, all that, and a lot of them have a lot of walkability. But what happens invariably is that we all do use a lot more than just our little area, our little neighborhoods. And so if you're going to be doing that, you can count on being on the road. And unlike, however, so if you're in LA, I remember very clearly leaving once where I was going and driving back to San Diego, and I took off at 11 p.m. on a Sunday, thinking, hey, I'm avoiding all traffic. Because if there's no traffic from LA to where I live, 2 hours tops, boom, done. Easy ride. And then, by the way, it could be even faster. It could be hour 45 minutes, when you're just no traffic. So I go 11 o'clock on a Sunday, bumper to bumper. Makes 0 sense. Like literally 0 cents. No idea how to even try to think about why that exists. In San Diego, that's not the case. In San Diego, all right, I'm going to avoid the road or the freeway if I can from 3:30 to 6 o'clock. You can plan for it a lot more clearly. So that is a nice thing about San Diego. And we can get a lot of places also with alternate routes using streets. But in any case, I think we do have more predictable traffic, but it's an issue across the state. No one can tell you it's not. Finally, let's go to the fifth thing that I really don't like about California. And I'm actually going to throw you a curveball. You're probably expecting, hey, when's this guy going to talk about the taxes, the state income tax? Well, yeah, it's among the highest in the country. But you already knew that, so I'm going to give you a different one. The ocean. Ocean. Dan, you've said 1,000 times how beautiful it is. 100%. It is one of the most beautiful oceans you'll find anywhere in the world in terms of just the sheer, just dramatic views that you get with these cliffs that fall right into it. We have awesome sand, and a lot of parts of the world, they have like all these just very grainy stones, and a lot of Europe just has terrible beaches. We have gorgeous, beautiful beaches, fine sand, wonderful. It's awesome. And you're going to find people in the water 365 days a year. Literally, I don't care what the storm looks like. There's going to be people surfing, but it's cold. So that's something you may not have known about San Diego and California as a whole. In fact, San Diego probably has the warmest water in California. The reason why is our water cycles down from the Arctic. So the water cycle, right, it goes from the equator, goes up the west side of the Pacific. And of course, we're on the eastern border of the Pacific Ocean, right? Our west coast is the east side of the Pacific. So the water cycles up from the equator up to the Arctic, gets frozen, and then comes down to us from Alaska all the way through Canada, right? And then finally into Northern California, Southern California. So by the time it gets here, it's a little bit warmer than what you're going to find in places like San Francisco, where the water is even colder. But make no mistake about it, when you're going to compare us to anywhere on the East Coast where their water cycles up from the equator, then you betcha, our water's cold, and that's something you may not have known. And yeah, by the way, our taxes are high, so you were right about that one too. So there's some things I don't like about California. Now, let's review. The reality is, where do I live? And I have the option of living in so many different places, but I live here. I live here because the pros far outweigh the cons. And we also illustrate a lot of those on the channel. So make sure you go and look at those. If you have any issues with anything I've said, drop it in the comments. I respond to every single one of them myself. If we can help you make a smooth move to San Diego without any of the fairy tale BS and just giving you the real, just like I do right here on this video, then do two things. Tap the bell for notification and subscribe to the channel. And of course, go to the first pinned comment. You're going to find ways to connect with us. And it's people like you every single day by email, phone, text, and even setting up Zoom calls so we can meet face to face, where we'll help you make the smooth move and find the right place for you. And by the way, we have a network of the highest producing, most amazing professionals anywhere in the country. So no matter where you're coming here from, we can refer you to the best in your town. I'm Dan Beer. This is Beer Home Team at eXp Realty. We'll see you on the next video.